What's up everybody, my name is Carl, and today I thought to talk to you about what I think are the 6 best looking cars from the 80s. I believe I put you guys through a lot of torture last week by looking at the 6 ugliest cars from the 80s, so it's only fitting and only right that we look at the 6 best looking cars of that era. Despite last week's monstrosities, the 80s period did produce some really cool, funky, retro cars. I will be using the 6 car category list because it seems to be a pretty good way of doing things and making things fair, and of course this consists of convertible, SUV, small car, GT luxury car, supercar slash sports car slash hypercar, and then general car, but this can more or less be anything you want it to be, so it could be a little city car or it could be a mid-engined V12 hypercar. This of course is my opinion alone. You may disagree with what I pick, so feel free to comment down below using the 6 car category list what you think are the 6 best looking cars from the 80s, and I look forward to seeing what you guys pick as well as what you think of my choices as well. Let's begin with the best looking convertible from the 80s, and this for me goes to the 1987 Ford Mustang convertible. The first thing you'll notice about this car is that there's no wood panelling, and also how goddamn cool it looks. There's something special about the way this car looks, and it's something you notice as a convertible, which by the way is where it looks good. You've got those giant headlights on the front, but they really suit the body of the car quite nicely. They are accompanied by this long streaking bonnet, or hood if you're American, with some cool subtle creases. This car is nicely proportioned in this wedged form with a pretty cool looking aero kit, which doesn't make this car look over the top or ugly, which can sometimes happen with some aero styled cars. In the case of this particular car, it has a really nice red pinstripe that runs around the whole car, which ties the whole thing together quite nicely. As well as this, the grated design of the taillights on the back of the car are really cool and arguably pretty iconic and contemporary for the time period. There's something dramatic about the way this car looks, especially in the convertible form. It just looks very clean, making it very good looking. And now moving on to the best looking SUV from the 80s, and this goes to the 1984 Jeep Cherokee XJ. Once again, we have another American SUV that's made it to the best looking car list, and to be honest, I don't blame them, as the Cherokee just looks awesome. The iconic front grille is tied together with squared off lights, which works very well. The entire design in general is very clean cut, and that is a good thing. There's no weird hybrid monster forms that we got with the disgusting AMC Eagle camback from last week. It's one simple form that's very effective. I believe I've mentioned this before in the 90s era of car, but unlike some modern SUVs which look too soft in form, this looks like a proper SUV with a very rugged aesthetic, such as those big chunky tyres and side creases that flow from both ends of the car, making it that aggressive, tough mobility vehicle. On top of the good looks, back in the 80s, this SUV was a big hit and immensely popular, defining that genre of car for a very good 17 years. Now moving on to the best looking small car from the 80s, and this goes to the 1985 Renault 5 Turbo 2. I can't believe a Renault has made it onto the list. I promise you, I'm not mad. Well, not completely. This particular car is inspired by its rally variant, but that's okay with me because just look at how good this thing looks. I love those quad rally lights on the front of this particular car. You could pretend that this is a rally car even if this is made for the road. Side profile views of cars are important, and this arguably is one of the best I've seen. It's a hatchback, but evidently from its stance, it's a sporty one and it's aggressive too. I think a standout feature of this car is the rear end. That rear spoiler on the back of the car is mad and ties in well with the squared shape of the back. I love how wide this car is from the rear, as it gives it proper stance and presence as well as the sporty vibes too. How is this a hatchback from Renault? It's incredible. Moving on to the best looking GT car from the 80s, and this goes to the 1985 Porsche 944 Turbo. On the subject of cars that have good side profiles, the 944 certainly is another one. I like how the side view just shows everything off, from the curved shape of the rear that flows into the long bonnet of the front, as well as the various distinctive sharp lines and creases. This is far better designed than the 928. It's much more smarter in appearance with better integrated taillights and headlights. And did I forget to mention that they are pop-up headlights? Because they are, and they are so cool! Moving on to the best looking supercar of the 80s, and this goes to the 1985 Lamborghini Countach. Yes! I am aware this car came out in the late 70s, but by the mid 80s, this car became an iconic pin-up poster car. When you think of retro supercars, this is one of the first cars that springs to mind, but aesthetically, it's still a good looking car to this day. The wedge-shaped form of this car is undeniably Lamborghini, as well as the use of that rear wing, which actually does nothing for aerodynamics, but just to add to the theatre of the car. I love the way the wheel arches are wider as the car is stanced low slung to give it that road presence as well as that supercar vibe. I think even today, if you were to drive around in places such as Casino Square in Monaco, it doesn't even matter what latest supercar you're in. If you see a Countach, everybody's going to stop and stare at it and be in awe. It's that much of an icon and a sight to behold. And finally, moving on to the best looking general car of the 80s, and this goes to the 1987 Ferrari F40. This is the pinnacle supercar of the 80s and the first of its generation to go past the 200-mile-an-hour top speed, as it managed to achieve 201 miles an hour. But still, an achievement nonetheless, and a very beautiful looking car. Automatically, when a car is designed by Pininfarina, it's already going to be very good looking. The F40 is such a special sight to behold, and unusually for a Ferrari there aren't really any curves to it, more or less being a rectangular, wedged shape. Even if that's the case, it's still stunning. I love how the rear wing is integrated into the form of the car and not just stuck on. It's an important aspect of this car. I really love the way the front end is styled. It's so smooth and simple. The square headlights are very well sculpted. Not to mention, it has pop-up headlights! There are so many angles where this car just looks good. The side profile is so iconic and cool because you know what this car is by looking. I like the cutouts, which aren't there for aesthetics but for clever airflow. Then we get to the rear end of the car, which I think you'll find is one of the best and certainly is recognisable by the car community. Everything works well, from the quad taillights to the triple exhaust pipe to the giant rear wing. You know it's the F40 and you can't help but admire it. A cool detail that I like about this car is the paint. As this car was a race car for the road, or how motor journalists describe it as a go-kart for the road, it's naturally about weight saving. The paint on this car is so thin that you can see the carbon fibre weave up close, which is actually pretty cool. The Ferrari F40 is certainly one of the pinnacle moments for Ferrari and a raw, pure work of art that I hope to see one day on the roads. So in conclusion, those were my picks, what I thought were the best looking cars from the 80s. Of course, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you might have a different opinion to me and may disagree with my picks, so if you feel like participating, please feel free to do so by commenting down below what you think are the 6 best looking cars from the 80s using the 6 car category list, which consists of convertible, SUV, small car, luxury / GT car, supercar / sports car / hypercar, and then general car, which you can kind of pick on your own terms. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!